Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Rafae Iqbal, and in today's show we'll be deliberating on two very important topics. The first being Pakistan's economic reforms and the future deal with the IMF. In that regards, we know the new finance minister of the country, Mohammad Aurangzeb, said Pakistan is on the track to secure a new loan from IMF as the leading body, as the lending body is very receptive in terms of agreeing to a larger and longer program. And the finance minister in that regard has also talked about economic reforms that the country needs to be taking, especially in the areas of taxation and energy and of course other fields as well. And in that regard, he also stated that Pakistan would need at least 3 years of support to carry out these reforms across these various sectors. And he further said that currency has stabilized in the country, and of course in that regard he also said that inflation is on a downward trajectory, but it will be gradual, but nonetheless it will provide relief to the common man. He also talked about the economic reforms that we need to be taking regarding privatization of the loss-making state-owned enterprises and the different agreements regarding increasing the country's tax net as well and increasing the tax to GDP ratio. This is the first topic that we'll be discussing, and in that regards we'll be discussing the different domains regarding the economic reforms and the new deal with the IMF, how it is going to affect the country's fiscal policies and how it is going to affect the common man, and what more can be done to increase revenue generation and provide a solution to the challenges that the country is facing regarding economic terms. In the second segment, we'll be talking about the escalation of violence in Gaza. Of course, as we know about that as well, there's been repeated calls for ceasefire. There's increasing international pressure on Israel to stop its atrocities that it is committing against the Palestinian population. We'll be discussing the different aspects to that as well. I'll introduce the analysts that we have in the studios. First of all, we have senior analyst Farrukh Pitafi joining us in the studios. Thank you for your time. Along with that, we have been joined by Faisal, who is a geopolitical analyst. Thank you for joining us as well. And on Skype, we have been joined by Ali Salman, Dr. Ali Salman, as he's just going to be completing his PhD now. He did. Well, congratulations to you on becoming a doctor. And he's also the executive director of Prime. Along with that, we've been joined by Dr. Nasir Iqbal, who is an economist. I'll begin my conversation from Dr. Ali Salman and ask him about the finance minister's recent statements regarding how the economy is on a positive track and regarding how the current government is willing to start a new and longer program with the IMF. What's your take on it?
Thank you so much for your kind introduction, Rafae. I think you're right that right now the statement of the finance minister is quite optimistic, and he has been mentioning particularly, I think, 2 or 3 points. He has quoted the stability overall, financial stability, economic stability, as usually we measure through the current account situation. Also, stock exchange situation is optimistic, and then we have also maintained the exchange rate in somewhat a stable range in last 6 months or so. So these indicators, I think, are positive, and on that basis, probably there is some level of confidence in the finance minister statements about the new IMF program. Now, there are also counter views. For instance, some sections in the business community do believe that the import restrictions are not fully lifted, and there are still at least some level of restrictions imposed informally, verbally, by the banks, which means that the import activity is somehow curtailed, which obviously then help the current account deficit to remain narrow. This then, of course, eases pressure on the dollar, and we see some level of the stock exchange in a positive upbeat mode, but then there's also the other point which we need to acknowledge, that what is the driving point for the stock exchange growth rate? Are we seeing new investors? Are we seeing new IPOs? Obviously not. Then the current investors, especially institutional investors, financial houses are probably there who are helping the high level of volume and transaction in the stock exchange. So these are the indicators, but then there's also counter viewpoints which we need to really look into more deeply, so that our assessment of the economic situation is should be more realistic.
Right, Dr. Nasir, including you in the conversation.
It is your voice.
Yes, Dr. Nasir, including you in the conversation, as there's a mention of the stock market as well. What's your take on the current indicators that were just mentioned regarding the new deal that we are supposed to have with the IMF, that is going to be a longer and more a stronger program?
When we talk about survival of the economy, highly volatile.
Please, sir, go ahead.
And linked with the news and very quick. Other are the
Trouble with we're having a trouble with your audio, Dr. Nasir. If that could be fixed, we'll look into it. Our technical teams will look into that as well. Moving towards Raja Faisal, what's your take on how these economic indicators were just mentioned, and how do you think the stock market is performing? And regarding the statements of the finance minister as well, regarding how a longer program would be initiated with the IMF, and it is the need of the hour at the moment, as he said.
Yeah, Rafae, obviously, if we talk about the economy of the country, of course, the trust is the key. And right now, of course, we are seeing that the current government is improving the trust on the economy itself. When you have trust building, policies in which, of course, you are taking the steps towards, of course, first of all, going towards the standby agreement with the IMF, and according to that, of course, the amount will be transferred to Pakistan. And along with that, of course, Pakistan is seeking another fresh, package of 6 billion to 8 billion. That too will, of course, help Pakistan's trust building and financiers and people who want to invest in Pakistan's economy. They would be having more trust in Pakistan's economy. And of course, Pakistan has sustained the pressures on its economy in recent times. Of course, we know that almost since 2 years we were having that pressure on the economy, because the economy was instability was prevailing over the economy of Pakistan. That too has a lot to do with the Pakistan's political instability.
Definitely.
And now, after the elections, of course, we are seeing that that stability factor, political stability, is actually prevailing. And then after that, of course, organizations like IMF, institutions like IMF, they are showing trust on Pakistan's economy right now. And along with that, when we go towards a fresh plan, a fresh sort of package from the IMF, that would actually cement the stability of the economy. And we will see that in coming days, of course, the inflation factor would be seen more acceptable to people at large, number one. And number two, the economy, of course, needs to perform well in terms that the dollar rate and the exchange rate is not too hefty and too sort of insustainable, and that has to be sustainable. And we are seeing that since few months, Pakistan's rupee is gaining power, is gaining momentum. This is an indicator that that can actually enhance further trust on the investors. I'm talking about the foreign direct investment that is being expected in Pakistan. And with the package like 6 billion to 8 billion that we require in coming days from the IMF, I believe that Pakistan's economy is back on track, and Pakistan's economy is going to perform really well in coming days. And of course, it would attract investments from the overseas as well. And once that is full-fledged, of course, we will see that the positive impacts would be coming on lives of the people at large. Though we know that in recent times the kind of decisions which were taken, I mean, they were very difficult decisions for a government like, for a political party like PMLN, because PMLN is always considered as, they come up with the policies that are more helpful towards the business sector, towards the people at large, because it's a political party that of course always tries to keep the people at large happy and their vote bank happy. But this time around, of course, they had to make a few very difficult decisions in the previous government as well, and this coming government as well. The only reason behind it is that probably Pakistan was just trying to make sure that its economy is back on track, and now once it is back on track, of course, we will be seeing that the positive impacts would be made all around.
Right, very rightly put. Farrukh Pitafi, what's your view on how this IMF loan is going to have impacts on the lives of a common person? As the finance minister also mentioned that the inflation rate in the country is going to go down gradually. How do you think that's going to impact the life of a common man, considering what the government has in mind for the people?
Right, Rafae, thank you very much for the question. I think that there are many things that have been discussed. First of all, effect on the lives of people, I don't intend to dispute the finance minister's faith in inflation going down. But my humble submission is that we were hearing before anything else that by the month, this month, right, inflation would go down or start going down. It is actually moving upwards.
Right.
So the problem is not in policy, it is in the atmospherics. All over the world, inflation hasn't gone down. There are countries which might have, like the US, might have tried to control it effectively, but still it is going up. So I'm not very optimistic regarding that. And if you ask any common man, if you are to conduct any survey, perhaps the first answer that you'll get, number one concern of any citizen would be a multiplicity of two things, inflation and unemployment, right?
Right.
Faisal said that Pakistan's economy has been under pressure for past 2 years. With due respect, it has been under pressure since for the past 7 years, especially because when we actually got into the business of changing finance ministers after finance ministers, that was the time when we actually also hit turbulence. Regarding trust deficit with the IMF, I understand that it has been there and we have actually tried to take care of it. And the fact that by the end of this month, the last tranche will be approved by the board and then it will be released, that actually tells you that we have reformed to considerable length. We already have technical agreement with them. But the problem right now is that all these neoliberal policies, especially when IMF is in a disciplining mode, they actually start asking you for kind of things that seem to actually focus on the fact that you only do reforms and forget that there are people who are going to be affected at all. It is like, taking a big number of people into space and then telling them that oxygen levels are going to drop for half an hour. After that, everything will be hunky-dory because there is some problem with your ventilation system or internal oxygen supply. So a human being dies in a couple of minutes in the absence of oxygen. So whatever you want to do after that is your choice, right? My concern is that the kind of demand that have been coming, especially asking a country like Pakistan that has actually gone through the floods which were mammoth, right, which were horrible, that you have to actually immediately phase out all the circular debt and we are not going to help you stabilize in that context. That becomes a problem because then inflation is going to be compounded. Once you increase the price of fuel, or for that matter electricity, what happens? You know, common man faces multiplicity of inflation, inflationary pressures. So what are those plans? I am usually one of those who believes that you have to cooperate with the IMF and you have to keep on actually trying to reform, and I'm totally on board. The humble submission is that any measure that increases inflation is going to hit common man really hard. And there is a limit to tolerance, I should say, not patience. We are very patient people, but of course we can die of starvation. We can die of, you know, a lack of water as well.
That's true, very true. Of course, the country needs to be cut some slack regarding what it has been facing regarding the phenomena of climate change and the other challenges as well. I'd like to ask Dr. Nasir what he thinks regarding the whole situation and what he thinks should be needed. What is the need of the hour? As the finance minister mentioned increase in the tax net, he talked about privatization of the state-owned enterprises. But when we talk about coming out of these challenges, facing these challenges in a brave manner, in a gracious manner, we talk about out-of-the-box solutions. What more do you think can be done, and what are the strategies do you think the finance ministry could adopt regarding quicker revenue generation so as to solve the problem of the country's foreign exchange reserves?
And Dr. Nasir Iqbal, we have been talking about divesting from these SOEs for quite some time. What is taking this long? Why is it that we haven't actually been able to start carrying out those divestments?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Absolutely, sir. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for. I was just starting by mentioning that there are two type of indicators that probably help to understand the economy, and one is the quick adjustment indicator, as you mentioned, like that. So they are behaving on the early exchange rate. They are in a step. Look at the all other parameters.
Dr. Saab, the audio problem is back. We are skipping every third word.
Can-
It seems there's an audio issue, and we can't hear Dr. Nasir very clearly, but we'll try to connect with him again and try to clear out the issue of this audio problem. Moving to Ali Salman, the same question. What do you think, in your views, what do you think about the privatization of the state-owned enterprises, increasing the tax net, and as Farrukh Pitafi also mentioned, what taking so long regarding privatization?
Well, if you allow me the privatization issue, I would like to address briefly the inflation discussion on inflation, because it has implications for our everyday life. And I like to remind ourselves that the state bank is an autonomous institution, which the autonomy was granted to the state bank according to the IMF program a couple of years ago. And so theoretically, legally, it is an autonomous entity. And the main task of the state bank, mandate of the state bank, is to tame inflation using policy rate. And despite significant increases, of the interest rate from less than 10% to about 22%, state bank has failed to tame the inflation. So there must be, a question asked in the parliament and also in the media, that why we have failed to bring down the inflation despite the autonomy granted to the state bank. And answer, according to a report which our institute, Prime Institute, released recently, lies in the money growth fueled by the fiscal demands of the federal government, which is propelling the money growth far above the real GDP growth. Just to give you a quick example, the broad money growth in last 7 years has been about 15% on the average, whereas the GDP growth is far less than that. In such situation, the inflation is bound to remain very high, and no administrative controls would be effective. So I think this needs to be highlighted, that unless we control the expenditure, control the government borrowing, we are not going to address the inflation at any significant level, and whatever the finance minister is saying is not going to be achieved. Uh, just give you a small example. Recently, the government announced giving bonuses of billions of rupees to the government employees, and IMF objected to it. That how come you can announce such spending when you are in the IMF program technically and going to another IMF program? So that's a big question mark on the credibility of the any such claims. Now, to come to your question on why privatization has not really gone into the first gear even now. I think there was some degree of progress in the last caretaker government, particularly with regard to PIA, and I should acknowledge that. And I think that homework is somewhat paying off as we see the result of it in the first quarter. But I haven't seen much this difficult decision. You mentioned, the government is taking difficult decision, but they are only just talking about taking difficult decisions. They haven't taken any difficult decisions, especially when it comes to the government own spending. And even for the PIA, a critical point is that while the privatization seems to be on track, but the burden has been parked on the taxpayers for the next 10 years. So there are question marks on the structure of such transactions, especially. This is a kind of a coalition government for all practical reason, and a major like the Pakistan People's Party has already objected to the privatization. So I think political agreement, political consensus on privatization is extremely important if we want to make privatization of student enterprises achieving its goal. Third point was...
Sorry to cut you, Dr. Salman, but you're saying that there is any kind of opposition from government allies regarding this? Because we were told that one of the reasons why People's Party did not join the cabinet was that it did not actually become A, part of any such decision, B, also not to stop it.
But practically what has happened, it's very senior senators, one of the senior senators have gone on a public record, President Rabbani, publicly assailed the government on the PIA privatization. And they have taken public position expressing reservations on the deal. So while we are seeing that, yes, People's Party is not part of the government, but through public posturing, let's not forget they are party in one government, also as the president. So this kind of political posturing is not going to be helpful, from economic reforms point of view.
Okay.
Right, what other measures do you think could be taken apart from privatization to balance out this problem that we're having regarding the foreign exchange reserves? Do you think there could be other solutions that could sum up these shows for us?
Right. I mean, this is a very, I think, old issue with Pakistan is facing dollar shortage. Though I think the dollar shortage is really, symptom of something else, and that is the productive capacity of the economy to earn rather than borrow dollars or get more deposits. Right now, the strategy is, get deposits from friendly countries, some rollover of external and domestic payments, debt payments, maybe possibility of some new loans. Most recently, we heard that government is going to request Saudi Arabia for a $3.5 billion loan for Bhasha Dam. So, when we talk about dollar income, we would like to see a higher level of exports, higher level of remittance also are helpful to an extent. These are the short-term measures because FDI dollar flow takes longer before a country would decide to invest in another country or a firm for that matter. In the short term, we should expect exports to grow and remittance to grow. I have not seen significant jump in the numbers. Yes, there are maybe depending on month to month comparison, there are some slight improvement, but I've not seen a major improvement in either export or remittance flows for the moment.
Exactly. Dr. Nasir, obviously, when we talk about going towards another program of IMF and having the current programs as well, this would of course require Pakistan to actually increase the volume of its economy, and different sectors they would be of course movers and shakers, so that we can get more out of them and we can enhance the capacity of our economy and the volume of our economy. Just wanted to know from your side that which are the sectors that can actually bring something extra for Pakistan's economy in coming years.
And Dr. Saab, by the way, just to actually add to this question, regarding fiscal belt tightening or macroeconomic stability, once we are actually sticking to that, is there a chance of growing the economy, by the way? And secondly, if we actually get a green light the project, the next IMF program, what will be the timeline? Do you think that there is a possibility of arriving at something before June?
When we talk about it, whenever we are, there would be like a tight policies, not a much higher growth. Very difficult, but what is actually needed? So, if we are really looking for a sustainable solution, we have to go for reform. And Ali Salman rightly mentioned the intention of the government on the some news and some announcement, but there is no real work behind these reforms. We are talking about these reforms over the last 3 to 4 years, like that. Our real problem is the culture that we adopted. How we can ensure that the other people or the investor would go for investment. That could be, if we didn't allow them to make investment, give them a certainty within, it would be very difficult. Lying on the other country, lying on the IMF, it can inject or a very short term solution. And of course, IMF is always a short term solution, never be a long term sustainable solution. But we need to identify those areas, especially let me highlight a couple of areas where we can like a big headway. The one is the IT sector. Globalization give us enough work on that side. Secondly, we can work on the. Thirdly, we can give a leverage to the businessmen, a free business. Once we give them the leverage, it will probably help us to regain the growth. That could be the only way forward. If we live with what IMF recipe is, that recipe is only more tax, increased tax revenue. They didn't ask about the revenue expenditure rationalization, because we are also happy, the government is happy with the increasing tax because it's burden to common people, it's burden to salaried person, it's burden to farmer sector. They didn't go for the informal sector, so they have the easy way to impose more taxes, to collect more money from the people, those are always struggling with the businesses. So that could be the solution. On the other side, if we go for the expenditure rationalization, so how we can minimize our expenditure. Look at the speed of privatization. We didn't, let me give you a very a bold statement that the intention of government is not to go for privatization. They are looking for some sort of spaces to convince IMF as well as to other that, look, we are going for that. There are some political backlash. There are some other issues that even they didn't define what kind of privatization they are really looking for. Is it the selling of asset? Is it the selling of administration? Is it the, like some sort of joint venture? What kind of privatization they are looking for? These are the all real challenges, and the government is not ready to solve these issues. They are still pumping money into the loss-making SOEs on the name of so many things, like they are giving so much fund to utility store corporation without looking at the benefit of that. They are giving bailout packages to railway. They are giving the bailout packages to PIA. They are giving so much like funds to steel mill and also so many other stuff. They are running around 500 different departments without any productive means. So these are the real expenditure. We very frankly ask that there is a very high defense expenditure. There's a very common narrative among us. So look at the ratio that the total defense expenditure is not as high as we are claiming. But the real issue is like the pension burden that will be accumulated in the coming year. The real burden is your the subsidies, the tax expenditure. You are giving about more than 2 trillion in the name of tax expenditure to so many sectors without knowing the benefit of those sectors. So if we collect those more than 2 trillion, that will give you a lot of space to make a lot of investment, to make a lot of productive investment. So we are not going for that type of recovery. We are just imposing taxes on those people, those are already paying. And at the PIDE with the Salman, we are working on the tax reform, and we will come up with the reform agenda very in the coming days to present to the government that what really they are looking for. We work on the tax slab, we work on the tax rationalization, we work on what kind of reforms actually needed to streamline the entire taxation. There are some spinners that actually pull all kind of these taxes, so we are heavily relying on these. Look at the performance of FBR. It's declining over the period of time. Even the voluntary, like what we call the submission of the tax return is going downward. The tax collection by the FBR in the name of these voluntary payments is substantially going downward. Per capita income is increasing, but on the other side, the tax to GDP ratio is stagnant or decreasing. So there are some loopholes within that system, and no one really looking for those loopholes. They are just looking the superficial part of this whole exercise. They are just trying to bifurcate this FBR into two different domains. That could be fine. We have to follow the global best practices to come up with that type of solution. But the real issue within that system, people don't trust that FBR system, and they are trying to cheat. They are trying to avoid because they didn't know where the tax is actually going. Do we really know it's for the protocol of the government machinery? It's for the running a new department on the name of so many authorities. Look at from Punjab, they are making so many new authorities. Even within the federal government, they are establishing every day a new authority with the name of that. This will one type of reform. But actually, this is not the reforms. Reforms mean we have to abolish the culture of NOC. We have to abolish this restriction. We have to give a fair play field to everyone to make investment. We have to give opportunity to all segment of the society to make investment. We have to open all these type of agreement and allow everybody to look into those agreement, and if they are really looking for these are the good investing opportunity, they can make investment. Why we are only relying the foreign country to make investment in the high profit areas? Why not we allowing our local people? Look at the example of this agriculture sector, where we allocated lot of land on the name of agriculture corporatization. What is the benefit of this corporatization? It is the only beneficial.
Fair point, Dr. Nasir. Because we are running out of time, I wanted to take the same question about timelines regarding new projects starting to Ali Salman. But Ali Salman, Dr. Ali Salman, I have another question for you. And it is something that came out of observation. Back in 90s, there used to be an ad where a child is standing on a cricket pitch and he is struggling and can't play, and then the mother used to say, what is wrong with my son? He can't play, he can't study, and then we were told that there is deficiency of iodine. So every time a prime minister, and this is the 5th prime minister who is going to the business community, and every time he talks about cooperation and reform and help, in the end the prime ministers are lectured on how to carry out politics and then how to actually conduct foreign policy. Can you help me understand what is wrong with our business community, sir?
I think it's a very I watched that, the clip which you are referring to. I think it's a moment of reflection, not just for the policy makers in Islamabad, but also for the business community. A lot of responsibility is on them. Increasing the productivity, improving the profitability, increasing the efficiency is in their own interest. And for far too long, they have dependent on bailouts, on subsidies, on concessions, and as Dr. Nasir rightly mentioned, a significant amount of tax exemptions. And therefore, I think we actually must subject the business and the private sector to more competition from within the country and also outside the country. I think that is the only way if we want our economic growth to go at a higher level. Other day, the planning minister, Iqbal, said that our country can achieve a $3 trillion size by 2047. But for that, the country needs to grow at 9% for next 25 years. And I don't know how realistic is this estimate. But obviously, the engine of growth is the private sector. And if the private sector is not changing its ways to doing business, then we cannot achieve this goal by government spending or by government investment.
You also mentioned, and Rafae, just by way of comment, I just wanted to actually point out that Dr. Ali Salman was talking about having more competition. So, regarding competition, there seems to be a kind of death wish on part of our business community. Every time they talk about trade with India, unconditional trade with India, one is reminded that in the absence of tariff barriers, and if you are going to lower the tariff barriers, your entire business community will be washed out because the Indian businesses are stronger, right? But somehow, amazingly, this logic-defying argument repeatedly, as if Pakistan has any control over how India is going to actually react to our request of warmth. We have repeatedly asked them, India does not respond. So what are we going to do? Every time the Prime Minister talks to the business community, he is bombarded with this suggestion that open trade with India. I mean, what do you want to do? Okay.
Right, unfortunately that's all the time we have, but a very important point that Farrukh Pitafi just made, and of course we talked about economic reforms and we talked about how these reforms need to be expedited and how there needs to be more solutions that should be brought on the table to increase the country's foreign exchange reserves. With that, I'll say thank you to our guests, Dr. Ali Salman, Executive Director of Prime, and Dr. Nasir Iqbal, Economist. Thank you both for your time and joining us in the show. I'll move towards the second segment, and where we'll talk about the escalation of violence in Gaza. In that regard, we've seen international pressure mounting. We've seen how the United Nations has talked about this. We've been seeing how there was a case registered against Israel regarding the genocide of the Palestinian populations in the International Court of Justice, the ICJ. And of course, regarding that, now we're seeing that Israel's main ally, the United States, there are protests erupting in these different universities of United States, such as the New York University, Yale and Columbia universities. And regarding the international response, there's also that the international community has condemned the attacks and urged for an immediate ceasefire to prevent further loss of civilian lives. This has been a repeated call that we've been hearing again and again. There's also that the United Nations has called for an investigation, and this is a development, into the reports of mass graves discovered in Al-Nasr Medical Complex and near the Al-Shifa Medical Complex as well. Roger Faisal, what's your take on that? How Israel can be stopped regarding its genocide of the Palestinian population because it is not paying any heed to the voices of the international community?
Yeah, Rafae, obviously when we talk about, somebody stopping Israel of doing whatever they're doing, and of course it is genocide which is taking place in Gaza, and it is taking place only because of one reason, that Israel is not being stopped by the powers that matter throughout the world. I'm talking about the US, I'm talking about the United Nations Security Council. They are not playing their part, and if they are coming up with the kind of statements, the statements which we always keep on hearing from them is that we are looking into the evidences provided to us, and they keep on talking about the one day that actually took place in Israel, and that was from the Hamas side, and still, I mean, the proofs were not provided to United Nations Security Council, and proofs were not even provided to the TV channels, the international TV channels I'm talking about, because the claims which were made of kids getting microwaved, and a large number of women getting raped house to house by Hamas, all of these statements, I mean, whatever the statements were made, there is no basis of it, and the the allegations on the basis that Israel conducted this genocide, I mean, them allegations are not true at all. But when we, of course, we look at Gaza, Gaza is wiped out, and now mass grave after a mass grave is being discovered, and now United Nations is coming up with the statements that they are looking into it and they are condemning it. This is not enough. This is not enough at all. We are talking about the masses, the armless masses who are innocent, who had nothing to do with whatever the territorial conflict is. They were just the innocent Gazans who are living in that land not since a year or 2 years or 10 years or 50 years. They have been living there since the centuries. I mean, these Gazans, they have been resisting the brute force used by Israel. And by the way, Rafae, when we talk about Israeli brutalities, this does not start in October. I mean, these brutalities, they have been committed against the Palestinians since the day one. I'm talking about since 1948, and even before that. They have been conducting all of these brutalities against the Palestinians, and of course we know that accord after accord was taking place, but all of the, like Oslo Accord, it is not being respected by Israel, a rogue state like Israel, and that is why we are seeing that Norway and Ireland and Malta and countries like Belgium. I mean, Belgian leader, he has talked openly now against Israel. Everyone is talking about Israel, their conduct and their war crimes. But right now, of course, if we look towards US, it is silent. We know that the protests which are taking place in US right now, today, they are even bigger than the protests that were being conducted in US during the Vietnam War, that they had to end that war. And now these protests are even larger than that. If we take the examples of Jews themselves, I mean, there is Torah Jews who are on the roads against Zionists, and they believe that this is genocide which is taking place, and they are standing with the Muslims, they are standing with the humanity, and nobody is listening to them. Nobody is listening to the Christians who are American Christians, and they know whatever is taking place in Gaza, it is genocide, but nobody is listening to them. You know why? Because all the fingers are pointed towards the war machinery of US that is selling the arms, and they are happy because billions of dollars are coming to them, and they have no trouble with it. I always say, it is not the clash of civilizations, because we see all of these protests taking place in the West against Israel. We see all of these protests taking place in the East against Israel, because everyone knows what is wrong and what is right. It is all about good and evil. Existence of good and evil is in every society, be it the Western society or the Eastern society. To me, whatever is taking place, rather than coming up with these statements that we are looking into it, it must be stopped.
Very right, and of course, in my personal opinion, I don't think it's about good or bad, even it's about humanity as a whole, and Israel is acting in an inhumane and barbaric manner. For Pitafi, what's your views regarding these protests in the United States, one of the biggest ally of Israel, and there's a movement we're seeing in different universities. It started from the Columbia and Yale universities, and it is spreading across all of America now. What's your take on that?
Right, Rafae, thank you very much for the question. First of all, allow me to actually disagree with you and agree with Raja Faisal that it is about not only good or evil, it is about absolute good and evil.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, tell me, what exactly are hate crimes? When you actually, or racism for that matter, or Nazism, or anything else for that matter, where you think that killing an innocent child is also agreed upon and permissible. Actually, it is encouraged. This is what has been happening. When Netanyahu actually gave the speech after October 7th attack, he actually, quoted a phrase from, not a phrase, a verse from a few verses from Bible, from the Old Testament, regarding one tribe that was massacred, right? Where children and animals were not spared either.
Yeah.
So right now, there is intent to kill everybody. And this, you can call it genocide, you can call it ethnic cleansing. It has fast modes and it has slow modes. But it has been going on since Netanyahu took over. And his project has been to actually destroy them all and take over the land. And that's why he had actually resigned from Ariel Sharon's cabinet, right? Because they were actually at that time thinking of reverting the control of Gaza back to the Gazans or Palestinians. So at that time he was finance minister, he resigned.
Right.
And I think that I was looking at how the US or other powers had reacted when Saddam Hussein was accused of similar kind of crimes. I'm talking not about Desert Storm, but the Second Gulf War, where they took over Iraq. They said that they are WMDs. So here we have a country with WMDs, and which has a proven track record of hunting down human beings, and not only the militants, but innocent men, women, old men and women, and children also. So the kind of numbers that actually Saddam Hussein was accused of pale before this, right?
Yeah.
Regarding what is happening in the universities, America, luckily is a democracy, and I know you have to conclude, but one line, two liners. America is a democracy, so people are protesting, and this is their right, and they will do it. Regarding what is happening in Gaza and Palestine, or Israel for that matter, my humble submission is that if somebody calls Israel a democracy with a straight face now, shame on them.
Yeah.
Shame on them. Because it is not only an apartheid state, it's a terrorist bloody state.
Well, of course, we hope that sanity prevails and there's an end to this genocide and ethnic cleansing. With that, we'll conclude today's shows. Unfortunately, we're short on time. We'll see you same time on Monday. We talked about Gaza's the genocide Israel is committing against the Gazan population and Pakistan's economic reforms. We'll see you on Monday, same time. Till then, take care.